manage a team, and I'm the requirements gathering person for a team, where the domain experts, or some of the domain experts, are in the United States. They're in Washington, D.C. The software development team is in Delhi, and the users are in Africa. And also the domain experts are also in Africa. It's a piece of medical software. Now, early on in this project, when there were a lot of unknowns and there was a lot of uncertainty, we had a daily meeting. In fact, we probably had a daily meeting for about 6 months. And finally, after the first release was done, we said, please, do not have a daily meeting anymore. It's too hard on us. And so now we have a meeting twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we found a time. It's 7 p.m. for me in China. It's 7 a.m. for the folks on the east coast of the U.S. And it's 4:30 or 5:30 in India. And we have stuck to that now for months. And that's what we've done. It's worked out very well. Additionally, what we instigated was that if you were a developer that was developing a piece of code for a feature that we thought was complicated, we then also required a feature review. So instead of just telling the tech lead, this is how the feature should work, and here's a storyboard, and so on, and have that technical conversation, we also said whoever is going to be the developer is going to develop it. In addition to the tester, they must also be at that meeting. It worked much better. The results were much, much better. People had an opportunity to ask questions, and sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. It depended on the individual. But again, there are ways to run distributed teams and still be agile. It can work. Part of communication management, as per PMBOK, is performance reporting. And I'm sure all of you have your favorite performance reports. I have a bunch of performance reports where weekly or monthly reports. You can do iteration status reports, burn down charts. I'm a spreadsheet kind of gal. I like spreadsheets. I really like spreadsheets. Really, yeah. If all else fails, create a spreadsheet. But the point here is that you report your performance on each iteration, and then you see how each iteration builds as the software builds. Agile does not have a specific and separate process for risk management. Not really. Rational Unified Process suggests and says you should do the riskiest things up front. Very well specify that. And the Rational Unified Process suggests you actually create a special document. PMBOK says you need to do risk management plan. I think it is a good thing to do a risk management plan. Just because you're doing something a little bit less formally in Agile, it doesn't and shouldn't stop you from, at the beginning of your project, doing a risk management plan. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good exercise. I really advocate it. Okay. Now, where Agile is helpful is that when you do the iteration planning, you can then pull out that plan and say, are there any risks? Are we monitoring these risks? What I have found in some of my more traditional projects is I go ahead and do a risk management plan with the team, and then I forget to bring it out again. Oops. Oh, should we look at that risk management plan? What's nice about the Agile methodology is that you can knowingly, it's like the reminder that, okay, I'm now doing planning and iteration. Let's pull that plan out. Okay. And just by the cyclic kind of part of the methodology, it's intrinsically helping you manage risk. You see them earlier, these risks. just to reiterate, can be done as a formal process. I've also seen it as a less informal, as a more informal process where there's a board where people write down the risks. I personally think it should be a formal process. But then again, I'm a PMP, that's my training. Procurement process. Agile doesn't say anything about how to procure, how to buy stuff. If anything, they would say your team involved in buying stuff. Depending on your company, like I know at IBM, for example, their procurement side of things is very separate from the development shop. On the other hand, if you need to hire somebody and you have a job description, for example, get your team to the job description or get them involved in figuring out what should be in the job description. If you need to hire or need to buy hardware, get the team involved to validate what the hardware specifications are. Big management is really follow what PMBOK is saying. So now, you say to yourself, well, that's all very nice. What should I do when the customer asks me when will the project be completed? Right? Because you have all these iterations. And right now, if you take that to an extreme, you never know. And actually, you may not know. So, there you have to sort of answer that question in with some constraints. So, you may see how much has already been done by looking at the previous iterations and the features that have been completed. You have your backlog, and then you might say something like, assuming that nothing additional gets into the backlog, is added to the backlog, then you have a high-level estimate for what's in the backlog. You can probably estimate of what's going to be when something is going to be completed. And then also, you can also say, given that the team of this size is working at this velocity, you can get to say that. I mean, this is, all of our projects are like that, right? When everybody asks, when it'll be done, you make a best guess, okay? It's a little harder here because what happens is the set of features is dynamic, whereas in a traditional project, the set of features are held fixed. So asking when something will be done, wow, that's cool. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so when your manager asks you how much the project cost, well, it's actually not too hard. That question is a little easier. Your project costs are the way you would manage your costs now. You've got your full-time equivalents, your hardware, your consultants. You have an estimate of how long you think the project will go on for. You can estimate the costs. You may have to say something like, with the assumption or with the caveat that there's no more features, or that we finish on this day, or we only do one more iteration, this is how much it will cost. Ask me again if we decide to add another iteration. You guys get a lot of thunderstorms, right? Yeah. You're in the jungle.